So, welcome, Francisco Litvay. How are you today?
Good. What about you, Leon?
Excellent. Sun is shining here in Gozo, and this interview we want to give value to younger people that are in school. Maybe they're like 17 years old or even younger. People that are studying in their mid-20s. And the reason being is that you, Francisco, are someone who has taken a really different career choice or route in life, I would say. You know, being the assistance of management for a company called Free Private Cities. So give us an introduction. Why are you such a different, or like, I mean, I would say it sounds a bit crazy your age being involved in that type of industry, but like, you know, why have you decided to not go for a normal career, study law or like study something normal and get a normal job, but go in a career in this type of venture?
Well, just to start off, I would like to say I am also studying something normal. I'm studying business
Perfect.
informatics as well. But I'm also involved in this company called Free Private Cities, which basically is working in creating these privately operated cities with a certain legal autonomy, such as somewhat like special economic zones like Hong Kong to China or Macau to China, but run privately. And well, that's one of the many ventures in a field which people normally call competitive governance. So that involves seasteaders and guys working on blockchain decentralization and all those things. And it's just a field I'm really passionate about. It's first full of opportunities. There's this market is certainly growing. We see more and more of these initiatives by the year, and I just got really engaged into it after finding out about it.
Okay. Yeah. So nothing special. Just follow your passion. Basically, it's a good advice already.
Well, follow your passion if you see opportunities there, right?
Okay. Yeah. But maybe we could take it from that perspective. Should somebody in 2019 that is in school, what type of directions should be avoided in your eyes? What type of studies aren't proved to be valuable in the future, and which areas do you think are really good to have in the future? What type of skills would you argue are good to build?
Well, the first advice I'd give people my age, and I told this a bit before the beginning of this interview, is to not take everything for granted, as like assuming that things will remain the same, that the university system, that the whole economy is just going to stay the way it is, and that you can perfectly just, yeah, I'm going to get into university, do all this job, and that's going to be it, right? The rate at which change is occurring, both technologically, economically, and politically, is just increasing every single year. It's getting to ridiculously fast pace. Like 5 years ago, most of the internet ecosystem that we have now was just completely different, right? So I'd say stay open-minded, keep looking for different alternatives. For example, I did a technical course before going to university, like a 2-year just regular technical informatics course, and well, I had to quit that, move to a different location. But the point is, you can find different ways to develop yourself educationally, right? You don't need exactly to go to a university. That's not saying that you shouldn't, that there are not good opportunities there, especially if you want to, I don't know, be a researcher or so on. But the point is, stay open. You have massive online open courses nowadays, which are also a huge cost cutter when it comes to that. So you can get nice certificates from internationally renowned institutions. So assess the market, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, the University of Nicosia has a completely remote online course on digital currency, right? So that's definitely something. And then even without certificate, I mean, you don't necessarily need certificates. You need competence, and you need to have experience and reputation, right? So you can get a lot of internships that will easily lift up your career if you do well, and then you don't even need any certificate. Or, I mean, okay, it's it's a small chance, but you can start your own business also, right? If you feel like. I think what you mentioned is right with the change, right? So right now the world is changing so fast. Even though I personally feel and sense that it's maybe a bit artificial, there's so much cheap money invested in specific kind of deep tech that's maybe accelerating a bit, which is a bit unnatural and maybe goes slower at some point later. But yeah, it's definitely true that we see it also in Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin 10 years in the game now, and we already have second layer technologies now. Like I had an interview with Adam Back, and it's amazing how many updates are coming, how many technologies are built on top of it, how many services are in the ecosystem now. It's just crazy. And so I think that's a good point. Like, and being open towards the things that come in the world. I mean, don't be overwhelmed. Also, have mental hygiene and don't have too much information overflow. But in any, even whether you're studying or just doing an apprenticeship or becoming a professional in some field, like to have an open mindset, a learning mindset, right? I think that's key. And if you don't have it or if you struggle with it, then figure out a way to get rid of or to overcome the problem. May it be a depression or a lack of interest. So find the thing that really excites you, and that should basically help you, give you energy to have that curiosity and to stay open-minded and to adapt to the change, and then you're probably well set. So give us a little bit
Exactly.
more details about the project, because I think that's also something which is quite mind-blowing if somebody hears it for the first time. What problem do you solve? Maybe from starting from that question.
All right. Um, just going back a little to finish what you just said.
Sure.
No market resists a good professional. So, of course, there's different market demands, but if you're really good and if you're really uh, competent on what you do, then you'll find your place.
Yeah, focus on the skill.
Yeah. Okay. So the project as we talked about before, Free Private Cities is working in creating these, well, free in the sense of somewhat autonomous, self-regulating private cities, and we're acting somewhat like an incubator, so to say. So we're basically approaching different governments from around the world and pitching the idea and uh, basically starting negotiations for the creation of such a project. So because of the nature of them, that these are places with a, a pretty good deal of autonomy. So like they can have their own private police and they can have uh, their own regulative bodies. It's the case that you just can't start right away, right? From most of the cases, you're going to need some regulatory changes in the country. So you're either changing a law or maybe even the constitution. So the initial part is mostly approaching governments to see if it's what would be needed to create such an such a community, and then which steps would be needed to take. So how do we do this now? Can we just maybe change an existing law, or do we create a new one? So that's part of the work, and we're already doing this with a couple of countries around the world. We've also already got into contact with countries from sub-Saharan Africa. There are also some projects in Eastern Europe, Caucasus, that area. There's also some uh, nice developments going on, and of course our the flagship project in which we were involved in Central America, which we already finished our part, which is basically the legal structuring, so to say.
Awesome. And I think for people who don't know anything about it, and it maybe sounds a bit like legal jargon now, but normal people, they live somewhere, maybe in Europe, for an example, and they believe they have the government is just the way it is, and it's okay that way, because we learn in school, okay, before there are only a few alternatives, which is like dictatorship and communism, and that's bad. So we need this some sort of democracy-based system, but still everybody, I think, sort of agrees, okay, it's not perfect. Like there are a lot of problems. Like there's a lot of money lost, a lot of friction, corruption, and in general, like the just the negotiation basis or the power structure is like really unequal. Like the government can basically do whatever they want, rip the people off wherever they want, and you have little. The voter on the other side has little rights and little power. And now you come and say, yeah, look, we will privatize the government. And I think here people would be really, really aversive or cautious.
At least skeptical.
Really skeptical, because like there's this narrative that capitalism is also part of the problem, and like privatization, that sounds like the worst kind of idea. So how can you explain it to somebody young that's not that prolific and educated in economics, why that would make sense?
Okay, so I'd like to start maybe with the problem that our current public structures have, which is, of course, there are different aspects of critique which we could go on here. A lot of different theorists already have gone into that. Maybe there's no need to go on those parts, but I'd just like to start with the incentives. I think it was Milton Friedman that said that give a person secure possession of a rock and he'll make it like a garden, and give him a secure possession of a wealthy place and he'll turn it into a desert, something like that. But so that's the thing, the incentive structure, how people are incentivized to act either in a proper manner or in a destructive manner, so to say. And in economics, you have this thing called the tragedy of the commons, which is when you have common resources and you have no defined property rights, no one which has the value of the capital of that good. There is an incentive to overuse it, right? To basically increase your momentary gain from exploiting that to the expense of the capital gain. So let's say, for example, a fish pond, right? So I have my own fish pond, and it's my fish pond, and I don't want to overfish it because there's then going to be no fish, and then I won't be able to fish anymore, right? That's somewhat simple, the incentive that I have here to preserve these resources. And, well, if nobody owns the fish pond, then, well, nobody actually cares for the long term. But it's even worse, because if I don't fish right now, then somebody else can also use the fish pond, will fish sooner than me, and he'll catch the fish. I'll have no fish at all. So you have basically this race to destroy, to overuse it. And that's exactly what we have in our democratic systems. Like, nobody owns cities as of now. These are just public resources. So nobody is interested in the value of capital, so to say, but everybody can receive benefits from it. Everybody can vote the regulations, and everybody can make their lobbying proposals. So that's something that already happens to our states today. We're basically overusing our public resources. And that's something that private cities are able to solve, because you basically then have a definitive ownership of the city. And this can be done either through, I don't know, like corporation owning it, or maybe a fund, like a trust of the residents. So you have something that's called an endowment zone, which already found use in China, which is basically, so the value, let me explain this from the beginning. So the point is, when you have a private city, or at least the city, then if the city is well managed, you see increase in land gains, right? So you see increase in real estate prices and basically land prices. So these can go up to even 50 times in the case of Hong Kong and Shenzhen, if you run an area successfully. So there's your capital value, right? You have the use value of the city, which is the taxation and so on, but you also see an increase in the capital value of the city if you run it in an efficient manner. And then if you have a private structure which is able to capitalize on this value, either through I don't know, a homeowners association or a corporation or a condominium, then you have an incentive to create regulation and to operate in a manner that will not decrease these prices in the long term for a short-term gain. And so that's a way in which private cities are simply more efficient than our traditional systems.
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. That sounds really, really good. And what you mentioned in the beginning sounded really familiar. Like people always try to get something out of the government, for example, before somebody else is doing it, right? So you try to get incentives like startup money because you think, okay, like if I don't get it, somebody else will get it, right? So it's by default there is a problem somehow. And another point that I'd like to touch is I think the innovation would be much better because we see on the private market, right, like phones, smartphones, or computer electronics, or almost anything. When there's competition, usually everyone has a different opinion on things, and everyone has a bit different taste. Everyone values different features and has different preferences, right? And that's the nature. We cannot have a one product for all. Like, it doesn't make sense. So I think when we have competition between cities, for example, we would see so many beautiful new ideas to run cities, to run local councils, to solve problems in urban planning, in voting mechanisms, and all that stuff. It would be just so much better because of competition. And now we could move over and discuss a bit Bitcoin and how that would look in a private city. So right now, I think we have the situation where Bitcoin is really unstoppable. It's global. It's borderless. It's permissionless. It's uncensorable, unconfiscatable. So really, governments around the world have to deal with the fact that basically, if they try to ban it, we've seen it in China. The moment they start banning Bitcoin, the usage will increase, right? So there is no way out now. There is a new technology that is helping people to protect their wealth from inflation and devaluation of, let's say it kindly, maybe not so well researched monetary policies. So a private city, for example, could attract Bitcoiners, could write specific laws to make it legal, and also could basically have a Bitcoin standard, implement a Bitcoin standard, and kick off a new renaissance, or similar to the gold standard, have a sound monetary policy. Do you think that the project that you're working on is basically willing, not really good prepared for this technical revolution as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's mostly due simply to competitive pressure, which, these huge states like Russia that decide to crack down on Bitcoin don't face that much, which is, so when people want to change a system, they normally have two ways, which is either voice or exit. So one is participation and voting or whatever, and the other is simply, I'm leaving this. I'm leaving this for somewhere else, and I'm putting my money there, right? And these huge states are not that affected by it because a guy in Moscow doesn't have so many opportunities to simply leave, but a person in Liechtenstein, Monaco, or Singapore is a couple of meters away. And that's something to notice because it's not only private cities, but micronations microstates already are innovating in this aspect. So if you see Liechtenstein, they recently approved their blockchain act, which is basically creating a whole legal framework, a whole legal structure for attracting and trying to create new blockchain initiatives and bringing technologies and investments and new companies to their own country. So while the big guys, which are out there simply ignoring it or outright banning it, the small countries are welcoming them. Hey, come here. We want you. Like, bring your investments here. Start your startup here. You also see that in Switzerland, where they have the Crypto Valley Association, which is huge. They have, I don't know, like something like 800 companies of the blockchain segment already established in Switzerland. Partly also because the government was willing to change their legal code to be more attractive to these new innovative startups. And this is also bound to happen in free private cities because, first off, the competitive pressure of being a small city, but also because these are places in which we're talking about basically cutting the red tape that you currently have in most countries. So these are places focused on having low taxes, low bureaucracy, trusted legal systems, and that want to make a profit by attracting new companies. So they have the perfect requirements for being the new hubs for blockchain tech development.
Yeah, excellent. So two questions to finish. Why are you bullish on decentralized currencies such as Bitcoin? And then second, why would you recommend somebody of the next generation, of the young generation, to learn about both private cities, but also things like Bitcoin? What are the key reasons for you?
My microphone was on.
Yeah.
I guess the
And
key
maybe
reason.
another thing that I just touched was basically what you said was an exit. So I see all the time there's a lot of uprise around the world, Hong Kong and other cities. And I always say, like, it would be so much easier if these people would just try and, the students that are suffering there apparently, or like they are on the streets because they want to have something to change. Like, they can be the change if they become influential and powerful through their influence of their business that they start and becoming wealthy by keeping their money out of the system, taking the money out of supporting their government and putting it into Bitcoin, for example.
Yeah, in a certain way, they were already exiting part of the structure there by like using apps that were already banned, or like using these decentralized communication platforms. So they already were exiting part of the system. So they were able to have this movement that was simply not possible using Chinese-controlled networks. But yeah, I think the point for both these competitive governance technologies and blockchain and Bitcoin and so on is that these are alternatives to our traditional bloated systems, and they're voluntary alternatives. They're private, voluntary competition to these centralized and decades-old systems that we have. So in this case, a central bank-backed fiduciary currencies, and our traditional cities and state models. So you already have a lot of projects which are kind of a mix of both. So for example, you have the BitNation guys creating the passports for like blockchain passports and so on. And in our projects, we also found use of blockchain for basically ledger, for keeping count of transactions in the city system, and in general, I believe in voluntary alternatives. I believe that if your idea is good, it doesn't need to be forced, right? Like fiduciary media is forced. You're forced to use it. But if it were good, it would be a market outcome. And so private cities and Bitcoin and these currencies are market outcomes. Currently, they're not mainstream. So not mainstream in use at least, but in popularity they kind of already are. Uh, but I believe they'll certainly rise, and as these traditional systems enter in more and more, they gain more and more distrust from people because they're simply not being capable of generating long-term growth and development. They're basically stagnant as of now and possibly in crisis in a couple of years. Then there will be renewed interest for these alternatives. What can we do different? What is out there that we could try out? And then that's where our chance will come.
Yeah, excellent. Francisco, has been a pleasure talking to you. Very interesting project. I wish you best of success, and thank you for your time.
Pleasure was mine, man. Have a great conference.
Thank you.